Hey guys! Today we will have a look at how polyphonic cables work in VCV Rack 1.0, and we will look also at a few different things we can achieve with polyphony. Let's start! Okay, so first of all, I want to thank my patrons for their support. Thank you guys so much, it means a lot to me. And today we will focus on the new polyphony feature in VCV Rack 1.0, and we will start with a short introduction of what does it mean to have polyphony in VCV, and then we will be using an external controller, the key step in my case, and later in the video explore also other ways of using polyphony. So we have 4 new core modules that make working with polyphonic cables possible, and one thing to keep in mind is that not all of the modules available to us in VCV are polyphonic, and you can see if a module is polyphonic or not in its description in the right-click menu, and you can also find all of the polyphonic modules under the polyphonic tag. Now, what does it mean to use polyphonic cables? Imagine that you want to create a 4-voice subtractive synth. So you will need 4 instances of each module, so 4 oscillators, 4 filters, 4 VCAs, 4 envelope generators, and so on. But with polyphonic cables, we can create all of this with just one polyphonic instance of each module, and it's worth mentioning that the CPU consumption of one 4-voice polyphonic module will be lower than having 4 instances. Now, a few things you can already notice. First, that the polyphonic cables are thicker than the monophonic ones, and also that the lights are different. And another thing to keep in mind is that a module will output polyphonic signals only by receiving polyphonic signals. So if I take the Midi module out of the LFO, you can see that the cables became thinner again, and when I reconnect it, they are again thicker and polyphonic. And let's really start with looking at how this will work with an external controller. Okay, so here I have the key step from Arpeggia, and here in VCV Rack I have 3 modules from Volt, the Basal oscillator, the Vorg filter and slap, which is a VCA and an envelope generator in one module. All 3 of them are polyphonic. I have here also the core module, the first one we will work with today, the polyphonic one. It's called Viz, and this will allow us to see how many channels we have active, how many polyphonic channels. I have here also the Midi module already connected to my key step. And let's take the gate output to the poly input of Viz, and you can see first of all that the cable is thin, and also that we have just one channel active. That's because in the right click menu of the Midi module we can choose how many polyphonic channels we want to use. Now it's set on 1. Let's for this example use 4. Already the cable became thicker, and we can see we have 4 channels active. Let's take this also to the to Basal, so the volt per octave output will go to Basal. Also the gate will go to slap, and you can see the cables are nice and thick. And now I can connect this out from slap directly to the audio core module, which can also work with polyphonic cables. So if I take it directly, you can see the cables are thick, and now I can play up to 4 voices, because that is what we have selected in the Midi module. Now we have also the mixer here, also from VCV, which is also polyphonic. So if you want to go through a mixer first, each channel of the mixer is polyphonic. So let's go to the input of the mixer, and from the mixer we will go to the audio. And again we have polyphony. Now what if I want to go, for example, through a reverb? I have here a reverb Plateau from Valley. If I go from the mixer or directly from slap, so I take a polyphonic cable into a monophonic module. Plateau is monophonic. So let's send this from the mixer first to Plateau. You can see the cable is still thick, but when I take it out from Plateau, you can see that the cables are thin. And if I play now, I get only one voice, only one channel. Because I'm sending a polyphonic signal into a monophonic module. And what we have here that we can use, we have the sum module. This is the second core module we will look at today, the second polyphonic core module. And this will sum the polyphonic signals together into one mono channel. So if I take it from the mixer, the mix, or from the channel, never mind, to the poly input, we see that we have 4 channels active. And that's exactly what we have selected and what we can also see on the Viz module. And now this will sum all of the polyphonic signals together into one mono channel, and this will go to Plateau. And you can see the cable is thin, but still we will get now 4 voices. So now we can use polyphony also with monophonic signals. Again, the sum module will sum the polyphonic signals and we will get a mono channel out with all of the polyphonic signals up to 16 different channels. Now what if I don't want a mono signal? I want stereo. I want to send those 4 channels into 4 different channels of my mixer and pen them and process them differently. So let's disconnect the Midi module and the audio module. Let's take them for a second here up. I have here another set of modules ready. Very nice. Let's send the reverb already to the audio module. Here we have again Basal, Vogue and Slap. So let's make the connections. The volt per octave will go to Basal, the gate will go to Slap. And now from Slap, I'm going to send the polyphonic signal. Again, we have 4 voices here. I'm going to send them through another core module, another polyphonic core module, which is called Split. And this will split the signal into separate channels. So if I send now the signal from Slap, again, the cable is thick, we are sending a polyphonic signal, we have 4 channels active. And now we get from the first 4 channels, we will get the separate signals. So I can send them now to my mixer, to separate channels. You can see that they're also penned differently. I can also send them through all different kinds of processing. And now I can send polyphonic signals through monophonic modules. So now again, and if you are with headphones, you can also hear that the voices are panned left and right. And again, we have 4 different voices in this case. And unlike before that we got a mono channel, now we get separate channel for each of the voices. And now let's have a look in the right-click menu in the Midi module. We have different polyphony modes. So let's have a look at them now. I will again disconnect the Midi module and take it up. I have here another set of modules and also the audio core module. Very nice. So what I have here, I have again the Viz module, so we can see how many channels we have active. We can see that we have 4, and also which one is active, and this is important. You will see this in a second. I have here also 4 different oscillators. I have the FM operator from BogAudio. I have the second VCO from VCV, going through a VCA, and it has an envelope generator modulating the VCA. I have here Plates, or the macro oscillator 2, and Branes, or the first macro oscillator, and I have here also a mixer. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to send the volt per octave output into another split module. Again, this will take a polyphonic signal. You see we have 4 channels active, and we'll split them into 4 separate channels. So now I have 4 separate channels, 1 for each voice, and I'm going to send this to each of the oscillators. So this will go to the FM operator, the first channel. The second channel will go to the VCO from the VCV. The third channel to Plates, and the 4th channel to Branes. And now I'm going to do the same with the gate output of the Midi module. Again, I'm going to split the 4 voices into 4 independent channels. So the first one will trigger the FM operator, which has a built-in VCA and envelope generator. The second one will trigger the envelope generator that I'm using to modulate the VCA of the second oscillator, of the second VCO. Then the third channel will trigger plates, and the fourth channel will trigger braids. Now I can send them also to the mixer. So I have 4 separate voices. Very nice, just like this. And now let's have a look at the first Midi, or the first polyphony mode, which is rotate. So I'm going to change the mode to rotate, and have a look here on the lights here that each time I'm clicking or holding or playing the same note, the Midi channel will move from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and it will rotate between the different channels. 1, 2, 3, 4. Very nice. Now let's connect it also so that we can hear also something. And now we will hear one note from each of the voices, from each of the oscillators. So this will be 1, 1. And again, I'm playing the same note. So this is the first polyphony mode, which is rotate. It will rotate between the different channels. Again, you can see the lights here are moving, and also here the different oscillators. Now the second mode, we have reuse, that it will reuse the same channel for each of the voices. So if now G will be channel number 1, B flat will be channel number 2, D will be channel number 3, and I have F will be channel number 4. So if again I'm going to B flat, it will be again channel number 2. Always G will be always number 1. I have here D, always number 3, and F, always 4. That way I can make sure that, for example, G will only be played by the FM operator, D will always be played by plates, and so on. If I don't want to rotate the channels, I can choose reuse until I go to a different note. So let's say now I want F. So now F will be channel number 1, but all the other ones will still be 2, 3, and 4. So this didn't change. If I change now another note, let's go to D. So now D will be channel number 2. And I can choose a different note. And it will always reuse the same channel for this specific note. Now we have another mode, which is called reset, that it will always reset and start from channel number 1. So if now I have 3 voices, I will have 1, 2, and 3. If I add another voice, it will go to 4. But now if I select a different note, it will always start with 1. So if I press one note, it will always be channel number 1. If I go 1 and 2, it will always be the first 2 channels. 3 notes will always be 1, 2, 3, and 4 notes, it will always start from channel number 1, and so on. Now there is another mode that unfortunately I cannot show you. It's called MPE, and this will work with MPE devices like the Rolly C-board, for example. I don't have one of those devices, so I cannot show you this, but if you have it, it will work also now in VCV Rack. This is also new. And again, I'm splitting the polyphonic signals into 4 different channels. You can see I'm using 4 different voices. So if I want a chord with 4 different timbres also, so I can use different voices, split the signal, and use different voices for my chords. And let's have a look quickly at another cool thing we can do with the keyboard. Okay, so here again I have the Midi module. What we are going to do now, we are going to create a sort of an arpeggio. So I know the key step has a built-in arpeggiator, but maybe you have a keyboard, a Midi keyboard that doesn't have this. So you can create your own arpeggios, arpeggiators in VCV Rack now that Polyphony is also available. So again, I have here the Midi module. It's set to 4 voices. I'm going to send the volt per octave output to split, because I want to split this signal. I want to split this polyphonic signal into 4 independent channels. So I have the first 4 channels available to me. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to send them into a sequential switch. I have a sequential switch from ML, which is now set to 4 steps. And I'm going to send the 4 channels into a sequential switch, which has, in this case, 8 inputs and 1 output. So it will switch sequentially through the different pitches, through the different notes. And this I'm going to send to the volt per octave input of my oscillator, which is the FM operator, again in this case. And I have here an LFO, and the LFO will be our clock. This will select, or this will say how quick the arpeggio will go. So you can use the clock, your favorite clock. I will take the square wave first to run the sequential switch. So now you can see the notes are sequentially being sequenced. And also I'm going to take this clock to trigger the gate of the FM operator. And now this will go to the reverb, and from there to my audio interface. And now I can play a chord, and this chord will be split into 4 different channels and will create the arpeggio. Now you can hear that it's not, if I'm not landing perfect on the time of the clock, there will be like a sort of a glitch. I hope you heard that. And this we can fix using a sample and hold. So let's just take it out of the reverb for a second. I have kinks or utilities from Audible instruments. This has a sample and hold section down here. Now what the sample and hold will do, it will take the signal, it will take our pitch, and it will output it only when it's receiving a trigger. So only, in this case, it will be only when the clock is playing. So I'm going to trigger the sample and hold with the same clock that's running the sequential switch and that's running the FM operator. So now, only when this clock is high, only then there will come something from the output. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to sample, I'm going to send to the input our pitch information that's coming from the sequential switch, originally coming from our keyboard, from the key step. And now the output will go to the volt per octave, and only when the clock is high, so only on the beat, let's say, the sample and hold will sample the new pitch. And that way we can prevent those glitches if I'm not playing directly with the clock. So let's send this to Plateau, and let's have a listen. Oh yeah. Oh yes, now of course you can use more than 4. You can create, for example, I have here 1, 2, 3, 4. I can go now 4, 3, 2, 1. So we can create a longer arpeggio. You can mix them as you wish. And now we'll set it to 8. 8 steps. Very cool. So this way you can create arpeggios in VCV Rack with the new polyphony feature and an external keyboard. Even if it doesn't have an arpeggio, it doesn't need to have. You just send the notes through a sequential switch and you can get an arpeggio. Okay, so let's have a look at another new module that was added, the merge module. Now the merge module will take up to 16 signals, monophonic signals, and will merge them into one polyphonic signal. So let's, for example, use the sec3 from VCV, which has 3 different rows. So let's change the different values. And let's run the sequencer with the multiplied clock, every clock multiplied by 2. Let's send all 3 rows to merge, to the first 3 channels of merge. And you can see that we have 3 channels active. And now we can use this polyphonic signal with the polyphonic oscillator, for example. So let's use again Basal from Volt. And I will want to quantize this polyphonic signal, so we can use the quantizer from JW, for example, which is polyphonic, so it can work also with polyphonic cables. Let's use the signal from merge to the quantizer, from the quantizer to the oscillator. Now you can see that the cables are thicker than the normal monophonic ones, which means that we are working with polyphonic cables. Now let's also use the split module and split the signal again like we've done before to the mixer. So the oscillator will go to split, and then we have 3 channels we can use to the mixer. And we have our sequence, which is actually 3 different sequences playing together. So this is sequence number 1, sequence number 2, sequence number 3, and they are playing together polyphonically. Now we can also send Basal through a polyphonic VCA. So let's use the one from VCV, which is again polyphonic. You can see this also on the tags. We have a voltage controlled amplifier. In this case it's a voltage controlled attenuator. It's not amplifying anything, but the tags we have VCA and polyphonic. So let's use this. And let's send the signal first to the VCA and then to split. Again, we have thicker cables, which means that we are working with polyphonic cables. Now let's use an envelope generator to modulate the VCA, and I will use the one from BogAudio. Very nice. Let's send it to the VCA and set a nice snappy envelope, something like this. Now this ADSR module is monophonic. You can see this by the thin cable this time. And let's see what happens when we send the monophonic modulation source to a polyphonic module. So I will trigger the envelope with our sequencer, with the gate output of the sequencer. And you can see and hear that the ADSR module is modulating all 3 channels together, even though it's monophonic. So when sending a monophonic signal into a polyphonic module, it will be sent to all active channels at the same time. We can see this also when sending a monophonic LFO, for example, to modulate the oscillator. So let's use the LLFO again from BogAudio, which is again monophonic, and let's use it to modulate the oscillator. Oh yeah. You can hear that it's you can see that it's a monophonic signal, again by the thin cable, but it will be sent to all active channels together. Let's again solo them. So this is the first channel, the first voice, receiving the LFO, the second channel, receiving the same LFO, the same modulation, the third channel, again the same LFO. So even though it's monophonic, it will be sent to all channels together, the same signal, the same modulation source at the same time. Very nice. Now we can make this a bit more interesting by using different triggers to trigger the different voices. So let's use the gate sequencer from Impromptu. Let's just mute this for a second. Very nice. Let's set a 7-step sequence. And we will use 3 sequences and merge them into one polyphonic signal. So let's use merge again, use the 3 sequences to the first 3 channels. And let's change the envelope generator to a polyphonic one. Again, this one from BogAudio is monophonic, but now we want to work with polyphonic cables. So let's change this to the one from VCV, which is polyphonic. Again, you can see this in the tags. It's written envelope generator polyphonic. Very nice. And we can use this polyphonic signal to trigger the 3 channels of the ADSR module respectively. So channel number 1 from the gate sequencer, which is going to channel number 1 of the merge module, will go also now to channel number 1 of the ADSR. Channel number 2 will go to channel number 2, and so on. So let's run the sequencer with the same clock, the multiplied by 2 clock. And let's unmute everything. Send the ADSR module to the VCA. Very nice. Again, you can see that it's polyphonic by the thick cables. And let's enter now a sequence. The first sequence, let's do something like this. Change the envelope to something snappy. And you can see that only the first channel is being triggered. And let's see this also on the mixer. You can see only the first channel. Because again, we are now sending gates only from the first sequence, which is going to the first channel, which is triggering the first channel of the ADSR, which is modulating the first channel of the VCA. So this is our first voice. Let's take another sequence, do something like this maybe. So now we have only 2 voices. And let's add another one. Let's do something like this. So we have 3 voices, and you can see that instead of using 3 oscillators with 3 quantizers and 3 envelope generators and VCAs, we can use the polyphonic cables and modules to create up to 16 different voices with only 1 set of modules. Now I want to show you another thing that will maybe help you understand even more that having polyphonic cables in its core means that you have up to 16 channels to use in each cable, and you can use them as you see fit. So let's for example add another sequencer, and we will use Entropia from the Geodesics collection. Very nice. Let's set again a 7-step sequence by clicking this button here. Let's change the values of the blue sequence, something like this, let's say. Very nice. Also a few of the yellow sequence, so let's go with number 2, step 2 and step 7. Also the probability, let's change of those steps. Send the yellow sequence to random. Very nice. And let's also set the macro state to add, so the sequences will be added together on those specific steps. And if you want to know more about Entropia, I will put a link in the description to a video I made about it. Now let's run it with a faster clock, a clock multiplied by 4. Very nice, so it's going, it's running. Let's reset also all of the sequencers. I will just zoom out a bit so it's easier. Just reset everything. Very nice. Now I can use another channel of merge to send this sequencer to the quantizer and from there to the oscillator. So again, this merge will go to the quantizer, so let's take the CV output of Entropia to another channel of merge. We see now that we have 4 channels active, so Entropia will go to the 4th channel of the quantizer, from there to the 4th channel of Basal. Now we cannot hear anything because this voice is also going to the VCA, to the 4th channel of the VCA, but it's not being modulated by the ADSR. So let's use the same clock to trigger the ADSR module through another channel of the second merge that we have, that is going to the gate input of the ADSR. So again, now we have just 3 channels, but this voice that is being triggered, that is being modulated or sequenced by Entropia, is going to the 4th channel of the ADSR. So we need another gate here to the 4th channel. So let's use the same multiplied by 4 clock, and let's send this also to the mixer. So we have now 4 voices, and one of them is not necessarily connected, so it's not coming from the same sequencer, it's not being triggered by the same gates, it's receiving a totally different CV and triggers, but still we can use the merge module, the different channels, to merge everything together. So we have another sequence going. And you can see that polyphonic cables mean that we have more channels for each cable, and we can send different signals through them as we see fit, and save some space and CPU by using polyphonic modules and cables. Very nice. Now another cool thing we can do is modulate each of the voices separately with different modulation sources. Until now we had just one modulation source, this LFO, which is then going to all voices. But let's disconnect this LLFO for a second, disconnect it just, and let's duplicate it. Very nice. Let's add also kinks or utilities from Audible instruments. Very nice. And another merge module, because we want to merge those signals. Let's trigger the sample and hold section of kinks with the first sequence of the gate sequencer, and let's send it to the channel, to the first channel of merge. So this will go to the first voice. Let's change the LFOs a bit. So here this LFO will be a bit faster, its frequency will be higher. Let's change this also here to a sawtooth wave and send them to the other 2 channels. So we have 3 channels active here, so we can modulate the first 3 channels of Basal. So let's use this here, and let's solo everything. So this will be the first voice modulated by the sample and hold. This will be the second voice modulated by the first LFO, this one. And we have the third voice being modulated by the second LFO, which is a sawtooth wave. Very nice. Now we can also modulate the 4th voice with a different modulation source. We can use the same signal coming out of Entropia, like this. This means that higher notes will output more voltage, so the higher notes will be brighter than the lower notes, will receive more modulation. So we can also modulate the different voices separately. Very cool. Now we can also add chords to everything using the same set of modules. So let's use more sample and hold by using Branes, again from the Geodesics. And again, if you want to know more about Branes, there will be a link in the description. And let's trigger the lower part with a slower clock, every clock divided by 8. Very nice, and we will change its range to 0 to positive 2 volts. We have here the range button, and if we click it and activate it, the right side of Branes will output 0 to positive 2 volts, which means 2 octaves. I'm going to use this for pitch. If we have 1 volt per octave, so 1 volt equals 1 octave, we have a range of 2 volts, we have a range of 2 octaves. Now let's send the 3 signals to the merge module of the quantizer. So those signals will go to the quantizers through the merge module, we have channel number 5, 6, and 7. And let's send the same clock to the merge module that triggers the ADSR. So we have here again the clock that's divided by 8. Now we have to send it to 3 channels, 5, 6, and 7, which are the respective channels of the voltage that's coming out of Branes. And let's send those voices to the mixer. You can see that we have now 7 channels active on each one of the merge modules and also on the split. And let's send those 3 voices to the mixer. Let's solo this. So we have a chord each time the clock is high. We can turn on the decay maybe just to listen to it better. So again, Branes is sending 3 different pitch information, let's call it, to the merge that's going to the quantizer on channel 5, 6, and 7. And the same clock that's triggering Branes is triggering also the channels 5, 6, and 7, which are going to the ADSR. And we have from the split channels 5, 6, and 7. You can see they are always connected, going to the mixer, and we have a 3-note chord. Now we can also mix the voices before they go to the mixer and send them, for example, through a delay. So let's use another small mixer. I will use the one which has 4 channels. Let's send them first to this mixer, to the small one. Pen them separately. Very nice. And now we can send them through a delay, for example. So let's use Chronoblob 2 from All Right Devices. Let's sync it also with our clock, change it to ping pong delay. And let's send this now to the mixer. Very cool, and we have chords. And of course we can also modulate them separately. So let's trigger the upper Branes with the same clock, the same divided by 8 clock. And I'm using the upper Branes because I want the full range of the sample and hold, and not only 0 to positive 2 volts like we have in the lower section. And now we can send 3 outputs to the merge module of the modulation sources, which is this here. So this merge will go to modulate the oscillator. So let's send 1, 2, and 3 again to the respective inputs of the merge module. If the chords are on channels 5, 6, and 7, we will modulate also 5, 6, and 7. So now the chords are also being modulated. Let's listen again just to this. So with each chord we have a different timbre. Very nice. Now imagine how many oscillators and VCAs and envelope generators we would have needed to use if you wouldn't have had polyphonic cables. Now I know what you think. Because we have only one envelope generator, all voices will have the same contour or the same envelope, but it's not quite the case. Let's use the dual attenuverter from Befaco. Very nice, and we will use its offset function, which will send constant voltage adding an offset to the existing voltage. We will use another merge, very nice, and send an offset to the channels that are going to the chord voices. So again, the voices which are our chords are going to channels 5, 6, and 7. Very nice. And now this offset we will send to the decay CV input of the ADSR. So let's set the decay bit down. And this polyphonic signal will go to the decay. And now we can raise with the offset the decay time of only the chords. So you see, we have also different envelopes for the different voices, because we are sending the offset only to channels 5, 6 and 7. This will affect only those channels. So we can have no decay for the other voices, something really just plucky or like clicks. And with the offset, the chords can play with a longer decay. Very nice. Let's do this, something like this. Of course, we can also do this to the attack time, for example. We can also make the chords have a longer attack time. Very nice. And we have a separate envelope for only those 3 voices. Now we can add some nice drony bass by using this module from Erica Synth, the black Wavetable oscillator. So let's do this. Oh yeah. Save this patch. Very cool. Now you see that this patch is quite small, but still we have a lot going on. We have chords, we have different sequences, we have different gates, different clocks, and all of this is thanks to Polyphonic Cables. And again, you can also use the sum module if you want mono signals. And that's it, guys. Of course, we've only scratched the surface of what we can do with polyphonic cables. There is much more to explore. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, and there will be also a link to this patch in the description, so you can download it and take a closer look. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button. If you enjoy what I do, consider becoming a Patreon. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe and hit the bell. And have a good one.